The independent music industry has been on the rise globally. In 2019, the market performed strong enough to break the $1 billion mark. In fact, it got so big that independent record labels held a market share of 35.13% of all the US sales. To put that in context, that was more than double of Warner Music Group. With artists like Chance the Rapper, The Strokes, Phoebe Bridgers, and so many more making indie music more popular, it's pretty safe to say that the subculture of indie music is getting more and more mainstream. But before we get into that, what's indie music? People have different meanings for this. Some consider it to be an alternative genre that includes music which is different from the mainstream. But the term indie is really just short for independent. So, in simple words, indie music is music that's produced by DIY artists or independent labels, which means that they don't have the financial resources or the influence that a major label could provide. Independent artists are usually paying out of their own pocket for recording sessions, touring advances, production fees, etc. To understand the independent industry better, let's look at why artists choose to go independent. Career control. Independent artists have total control over their careers. That means complete control over the direction and creative content of the music. They are able to explore lyrical content and innovative musical styles that are excluded from the mainstream. Labels might start offering them deals wherein they put a lot of money on them, but in return, they want a piece of the artist's market share. Copyrights of their work. Without a label, any revenue generated from things like album sales goes right into the artist's pocket. Being associated with any major label means the artist does not get to keep the rights or even the creative control over their music. The benefit of owning the copyrights is that they can determine how much of the royalties will each person that took part in the song will get. The recent feud between Taylor Swift and Scooter Braun is a perfect example for this. Look at this Tumblr post from Taylor describing how she wasn't allowed to perform any music from her own back catalogue at the 2019 AMAs. This just goes to show that most record deals allow the label to have control over the copyright of an artist's original work. More earning. Independent artists are their own record label, so they keep 100% of the profits. They make all of the profit from their live sales because they're not buying them from any label. The label tends to profit 5 times the amount as the artist and literally almost take all their money from both album sales and touring. Concept of music streaming or internet radio enables artists to get paid when their songs are played on the internet. Even the karaoke tracks of songs can be sold to make money. If a song happens to get featured in an advertisement or a film, they can license masters to the same. No deadlines or contracts. Being associated with a major label requires artists to meet deadlines and their music is influenced by corporate demands. Whereas indie artists are their own bosses. They set their own schedule of work and their contract doesn't ever really end when they run out of money or ideas. This is one of the main reasons indie artists like to remain independent. They don't have to sell out to what will make the label the most money. The concept of indie music isn't new though. In fact, its origins go back to the 1970s UK punk scene, and a number of histories cite the Buzzcocks' DIY production of their debut EP Spiral Scratch as a pivotal release for independent music. This is due particularly to the record's success despite its production being funded only through money raised from the band's friends and families. Coming back to a more recent time, the 2000s was a landmark decade for indie music, producing acts that are still huge today like the Arctic Monkeys, Arcade Fire, and the Strokes to name a few. Indie music has had a rocky growth, as the 90s is also considered a golden age for it as it pushed grunge music spearheads like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, the Smashing Pumpkins into the mainstream, achieving multi-million sales and a global profile beyond the wildest dreams of independence. It's important to note that in that decade the term indie had a connotation of alternate rock, as most big indie artists that came out of the post-punk era were doing that style. As opposed to today where the term indie doesn't have to point to any particular genre. Indie artists have spread out across pretty much all styles like rock, folk, pop, hip-hop, rap, etc. and are gaining recognition in their respective niches. For example, in 2020, Phoebe Bridgers, known for her emo and folk style, dropped her album at the height of the global pandemic and received massive critical acclaim, picking up 4 Grammy nominations in the process, including Best New Artist. In 2020, The Strokes, a rock band, released their first studio album in 7 years, The New Abnormal, produced by Rick Rubin and released through Cult and RCA. Critics considered the album a return to form. It went on to win Best Rock Album at the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards, and as of 2020, the band has sold 5 million albums worldwide. One place where I was surprised to see the same trend though is my own country, India. There has been a massive boom in the independent space here. In a country dominated by Bollywood music, the sudden emergence of independent artists has been remarkably impressive. People are now way more willing to listen to experimental music from unknown artists. I wanted to know the reasons behind this sudden spurge, and this is what I could come up with. First and biggest game changers, streaming platforms. One of the biggest factors behind this change is the emergence of digital audio streaming services. Some of the most widely used platforms in this country have not been around that long. For example, Spotify, which has a massive consumer base in India, launched in late February of 2019 and acquired 2 million users in the first 2 months itself. For independent artists, these platforms provided a much needed alternative to large music producers or labels. For the first time, they had the option of reaching out directly to a very large listening population on the power of their music alone. Indie artist Nikita recently said in an interview with Hindustan Times that Spotify is independent artist friendly. She went on about how these platforms offer analytics like streams and other helpful metrics that can help artists target their audiences better and level the playing field. More and more indie artists have started to appear on the top charts. Throwback to when Obama shared his top songs of the year in 2019, and Indian indie big shot Pratik Kuhat was on there. Collaborations. There have been an increasing number of collaborations between the indie scene and the mainstream entertainment which have brought attention to independent artists. Whether it's the movie Gully Boy, which was based on the lives of two Indian rappers, Divine and Nazy, and showcased their journeys of beginning from a Mumbai slum to becoming top Indian rappers, or Jasleen Royal releasing the single Kho Gaye Hum Kahan for the movie Baar Baar Dekho in collaboration with Pratik Kuhat. Jasleen also made an appearance in the movie Gully Boy. After that movie's release, Ranveer Singh, who played the lead, showcased his support by starting an independent label called Ink Ink. The label specializes in signing independent Indian hip-hop artists and rappers. Support from such a huge Indian celebrity was a big statement for the indie scene. Touring. Apart from the reasons I mentioned, the number of live shows done by indie artists have significantly gone up, and the scale of the shows has also increased. Now, I don't have any data to back this up, but being involved in the live scene myself for about a year, I'm going by what I've witnessed. And makes sense. As people become more receptive to new styles and artists, they want to experience it in person. Indie artists are now going on multi-city tours playing sold-out venues, and some are even going international. And lastly, COVID-19. The pandemic led to a dip in the number of mainstream releases and resulted in a new wave of indie artists who used the lockdown to make and release fresh music. Since most mainstream music in India is associated with Bollywood, the decreased number of film releases further added to the space for indie music. And because a lot of people were spending most of their time online, this led to an increase in streams and discovery. Look at these charts. Nearly all of them show an increase in streams around the time of pandemic. Here's a statement by the spokesperson of JioSaavn, an audio streaming platform owned by Mukesh Ambani's Reliance Industries. This year, we have noticed an increase in the streams for indie music as well as regional music released by independent artists. We attribute this rise to two factors: the lack of big budget films being released and people exploring and engaging with new music during the lockdown.